Welcome to a new episode of Outside the Panels with your host, Johnny the Machine Hughes.
Welcome everyone to another episode of Outside the Panels. As always, I'm your host, Johnny the Machine Hughes, and this time around, well, there are three Marvel writers that I have loved over the last couple of years. Carla Pacheco on Spider-Woman, sorry, getting all confused there. Jed MacKay on Black Cat. Throwing Dennis Hopeless on his Spider-Woman run. This one beats all of those hands down. This is the ultra talented, the ultra funny, the one and only Eisner Award winning Kelly Thompson. Kelly, how you doing? You all right?
I'm great. I need that intro. Can you do that for me every morning to help me get out of bed? Because it would help a lot.
Just record it as your like hello, good morning Siri message, and you'll be fine. You'll be like, yeah, I'm there.
I think it's much more believable with your accent than if I make it for myself, though. You might have to do it for me.
Yeah, okay, that's cool. That's fine. I can do that. That's cool. Kelly, how the hell are you?
I'm good. We've had a really good week for Black Cloak, which is my new book. So it's been nice. You know, it's sort of a weird thing. It's a lot of build, a lot of pressure, and then it sort of debuts. But, you know, it's not like a movie premiere. So it's a little sort of anticlimactic in some ways. And it's funny to sort of wrestle with those feelings where you're like, you're looking at it and you're like, listen, this went as well as it could go. Like, I can't, there's no complaints, but you're still like, wait, what do I do now? You know, it's just so much work and you're just sort of not sure what to do with yourself.
Yeah. Wait for issue 2. That's what you got to do.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of scripts on my to-do list, so that's what I should be doing. But yeah, it's hard to concentrate. You know, the excitement and the pressure and the buildup and everything. And yeah, it's been great. We're getting great reviews. People are talking about it. It's exciting. It's exciting.
Great review. What did I give this book? I gave it double thumbs up. This is 5 out of 5 for me from the get-go.
Thank you so much.
I've got to ask, you are perennially known as affiliated with Marvel, and that's cool. It's massively cool because it's where you won your award on Black Widow, right?
It is, yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
What was that like?
It was awesome. I mean, so I found out we won from Al Ewing.
Right.
Because when I saw who we were nominated against, I was like, there's no way Black Widow wins in that category. Like, it felt impossible. So I was like so excited for us to be nominated, but I just thought there was no chance in that category. Like there were all these really cool creator owned books there. And I felt like, you know, and maybe that ended up helping us because we were sort of different than the other books because they were all creator owned and we were sort of the big 2 book. But I just thought I'd read a lot of those other books and I just thought, even though I love Black Widow, I don't think there's a shot. And then Al was like, you know, it was during the pandemic still, so they weren't really having the awards. I mean, they were doing like a broadcast or whatever. And Al was like, congratulations. And I was like, what are you talking about? I didn't even remember the awards. He's like, you won, dummy. And I was like, what? And I like ran over to the broadcast and I was like checking it out. I was so happy. Cool. I was so happy because, man, I really loved that book. I loved that book and I loved doing it with that team. That was sort of my perfect team. And it's particularly cool that except for some really talented letterers and some guest artists who came in who were incredible, like both my Raphaels that came in, you know, it was an all woman book but we like really got known for our action stuff, which I sort of love the dichotomy of that. Like it's not necessarily what you think a woman team is going to be credited with or these incredible action spreads and everything. So, and I was also just really glad because Elena deserves so much credit there. I mean, she proved herself to be such a master artist, I think. And I was really glad anything that Eisner can do to draw attention to the book and to what we were doing there, you know, I'm just really happy about it.
I think Black Widow exists as a kind of indie book within Marvel. If I've got to be a little bit honest, it seems her adventures more recently than not, perhaps, tend to be a little bit odd,
Yeah.
a little bit peculiar. I mean, Mark Waid did that
Mhm.
great run
Yeah, I love that
before
run.
you guys.
Mhm.
So you kind of, because she's such like a spy or
Mhm.
she feels apart from the Marvel universe.
A little bit, which I think is a strength. Like, I mean, that's the kind of stuff I like to lean into when I'm writing that book. But I definitely think you're right that it it's hard to make it like a breakout. You know, she's never going to be Spider-Man. I mean, listen,
Yeah.
almost nobody at Marvel is Spider-Man, the same way almost nobody at DC is Batman. It's just the way it is. But you know, it's even hard, I think, with Black Widow for her to be, you know, like a Thor or a Hulk title. Although, I mean, honestly, like Hulk has struggled a lot historically, and then you know, you get Al coming in and doing this incredible run, and it sort of redefines what you think of. So I mean, I think you can break out that way, but I agree with you, it seems to be treated as more of a niche book, maybe because she's not just clearly just a superhero title, and that's like where Marvel and DC sometimes excel. Although to be honest, I still like the weird books. Like I still go for the weird books every time, you know, the Human Targets and the, you know, Hellions. I think Zeb Wells' Hellions book fit really well in that in the X-Men stuff that was going on at the time. But to me, it did seem like the outsider book, and I liked it for that. Like, I liked that it was sort of doing its own thing and just sort of tying carefully into these sinister parts of it, you know? So I tend to always go for those books anyway, you know?
I find it ironic that you said not every book in Marvel's a Spider-Man. It's funny, sometimes I think Spider-Man's not Spider-Man, but that's a cynic in me. Zeb Wells, and I've said this on the No Prize podcast that we have, Zeb Wells, I think, is killing it on Amazing Spider-Man. Well, if it wasn't for all the goddamn crossovers, get rid of, you know, you're just getting some momentum going up, and then all of a sudden it's like, but that's comic books as a whole.
It's definitely a recurring problem. I'm sorry to say I'm very behind on my reading, but I loved Zeb's first book, and I'm a really big fan of his, and I loved a lot of the stuff he was doing on the Beyond arc that came before this too. So I'm sure he's doing great, and I thought that first issue was really, really great.
I think this stuff's better than his Beyond stuff. Just put that out there.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
I always
listen, you always want to see that, even when you're a part of it, just because, you know, it's exciting when you get the writers in a room together to create a big story. It's fun. But at the end of the day, you know, I always feel like one person's vision for a thing is going to be a little cleaner and more powerful, you know?
I think for me, the Beyond stuff felt a little bit more editorial. Kind of like we've got to tell this story. This is the bit you've got to work with. Off you go. Whereas the Amazing Spider-Man run seems a lot freer and a lot more. You know what, you can do your own thing. And I think that shows in the writing. Plus, I've got to be honest, I'm not a Ben Reilly fan, so you know what, having a book about Ben Reilly.
That's hard from the jump then, I think, because you know, your character.
I've got my blinkers on.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I think that's fair. I mean, that's the way it goes for, like, that's what's so great about the comics are for everyone, but not every comic is for everyone. Like the great point of the medium is that there is something for everyone, but that doesn't mean that, you know, Captain Marvel always has to be for you. Like, you may find like, oh, this new story isn't for me, you know. It's just the way it goes. But yeah, I do think the Beyond stuff, you know, that was the hardest, just because of the circumstances of how my issues ended up coming out and what my schedule was and stuff. It didn't end up being the greatest experience for me, but I really enjoyed working with all those people. I also think a thing that people don't really understand when they're planning it, like I see a lot of criticism about my issues that I was focusing too much on other characters who weren't Pete and Ben. But I think what people who have that criticism don't really understand, and fair enough, it's not their job to know how writers' rooms works. I mean, that's plotted because the conversations and the things that need to happen between Ben and Peter, they have to happen as a buildup. And so you have to populate the story with these other characters and ideas and villains and things and lay it all out to build to what that's going to be. So, you know, I don't know. It wasn't because I wanted to write a Daughters of the Dragon book instead of Spider-Man. It was just because these were the characters we had all decided to play with and like move around. But, you know, and I'll be honest, I was definitely one of the voices in the room who was like, this story is incredibly white and male so far. Yeah. Like Peter lives in New York City. It's one of the most diverse places on the planet. Like how is this how his world looks? You know, I understand we want to play with classic characters, but I think a lot of people in that room agreed, whether that was because there was more diversity in the room or not. And so, you know, we knew Miles was going to play a big role, and that obviously helps. But because of his own book, he was only going to be able to play a role at certain times. And so, yeah, we were interested in upping the diversity and making Peter's world look a little more New York, to be honest. And that was one of many reasons that Daughters of the Dragon and characters like that got drawn into the narrative, and Monica Rambeau Photon and Beyond and all of that stuff, you know. So
so for me, it's kind of like New York City is the plethora of superhero world in Marvel Universe. Yeah. Apparently, there's no superheroes in Dakota, but north or south. So you'd expect to be a level of diversity. I think what I like the most about the characters you've mentioned there, you know, those characters been around for ages, you know. Miles Morales he's kind of taken time to get to where he is. It's not been kind of sort of like, this is the new Spider-Man, like it or not. It was kind of built in piecemeal until you got the whole, and then, you know, Spider-Verse put him on the map. Without a shadow of doubt.
Well, it's so great because, I mean, you know, Miles was so popular in comics that I think we all felt really confident he'd do well. But once you have that breakthrough, like to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I guess we call that, even though it's Sony. But once you have a breakthrough on that level, like, it's so great because you just know the future of that character is assured. I mean, who knows where he'll go, but he'll never be off the table now because he's a $1 billion character, and as he should be.
Yeah, because more people will watch videos than they'll watch in movies and films and stuff. Right. So talk about building then. So as a Marvel person, ironically, some would say, considering what you're famous for, Black Cloak. This is an Image book.
Yes.
Are you the next Todd McFarlane?
No. I'm not the next anything. I'm just trying to survive. This is my first book with Image. I did get to do one issue of Michael Walsh's Silver Coin, that horror anthology that Image did. So I got to play in the Image pool a tiny bit before, but yeah, this is my first ever, my name on the cover, my series, blah blah blah, well, mine and Meredith's, and it's been really exciting. It's been a big learning curve, but it's very exciting. I couldn't be happier to be at Image. It's it feels like a moment, right? As a creator, like, that's a thing you want to check off, like, you got to work with the great Image Comics. And
what makes it different then? Because I mean, first off, it's your own book, it's yours and Meredith's character, so the world is your oyster. You can go wherever you want with it. It's not like a major icon, which you can have to make sure that the reset.
It's not a $1 billion property yet.
Not yet. But still, how's the working process kind of differ?
Well, I think that you're right. I think the biggest thing is the freedom to, you know, characters can just be whatever we want them to be. We're in charge of that and nobody's telling us no. I also think the freedom to not be bound in by the 20-page issue, which gives you some freedom.
Whoa, first issue's a corker for that. I saw
Yeah.
this on my review pile. I was like, oh, yeah, I'm going to look at this, and I saw 60 pages. I was like, right, there's my night gone. Cheers.
Yeah, you usually hope it's a happy discovery and not a bad one.
No, it was good. I can see why it took the page count. To be honest, looking through the first issue, there's not a 20-page mark where you can say, "Oh, stop there," or
Yeah.
you've got to get this out as like your pilot episode.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, we always envisioned I probably doing a oversized issue,
Mhm,
and when we were working on it and was starting to come together, I really felt we were going to need an oversized issue, in part because, not to be like, oh, I'm so great, I'm not overwriting, especially because there's a significant number of little captions on that first page you're showing right now, but like that's followed by like 3 or 4 almost silent pages. So
mhm,
I would say that every page is not weighted down with
mhm,
text, but because of that, especially when you're bringing someone into an all new world, I think you got to give people a chance, like,
mhm,
especially if you're not going to weight it heavily with text on every page. Like, you really got to give them the time to invest in the world, invest in the characters, and know what the kind of story they're getting into.
mhm.
So I think we always knew we were going to do oversized, but the reason this one ended up the way it did is primarily because I'm doing this on Substack as well, Substack grant that funded it.
Mhm.
And so when we first started out, we were planning to release the pages digitally in like probably 5 page chunks, which
Mhm.
as a writer, that was a really big challenge, because now you have to not only make a good ending within that 20 pages, but now you need like 4 short
Mhm.
endings also, or at least sections that demarcate and that make sense to make up. And so when I was first starting writing Black Cloak, I was having to look at it with both those eyes.
Mm,
And honestly, because of the way the formula of issues, it was breaking pretty well
mhm,
into those smaller chapters, but it was limiting us, because
mm,
it was still limiting. And so anyway, we ended up doing a poll to the
mhm,
Substack readers, because we had this really great group of people, and we're like, well, let's just ask them how they want to read it.
mhm.
And some people were interested in the weekly installment, but most people preferred to read it more like a regular comic, larger
Yeah.
installments once a month. And so we pivoted to that, which was great for me,
Mhm.
because it made writing, I only had to think about writing for the issue and writing for the trade, and that was much easier.
Yeah.
But it did leave us with this problem where we had already started with these sort of smaller chapters in mind, and so what would make the best first issue for us? And
Mm.
this was that, and it ended up
Cool.
being like 50 some pages. So
Cool. It's funny you talk about it's kind of like a TV show. You watch what am I watching right now? All right, I'm a bit of a when you watch Hawaii Five O, for example, yeah, you want the commercial break to come when
yeah,
something's happened,
yeah,
like the body has been dumped at the police station or something.
yeah,
You don't want the commercial break when
yeah,
they're at the prawn van
yeah,
ordering shrimp.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, so you've got to
yeah.
time it right.
Or
So,
like if you live in a world of YouTube, which so many of us do, or also
oh,
other shows where they insert commercials whether there's a break for it or not, and you've
yeah.
become really, and I think we're all getting sort of used to this because this is the reality we live in, but like it gives you a little bit of an appreciation for the
Mm.
art of building to the commercial break, right, where you're like, wait, I'm in the scene, and like now you're watching a mop commercial. So I
Yeah.
don't know.
I have an insidious idea that YouTube do that on purpose so they buy more subscribers to cut out the adverts. Yeah,
I
that's weird.
wouldn't put it past anyone.
Yeah, cool. What was it like working with Meredith McLaren? I love her work. I saw her work a couple of years ago with Super Sexy Fun Times, and I've had the pleasure of interviewing Meredith before. And
Oh,
she
you
is
have?
yep, she's an absolute
She's
scream.
she's a delight. I love her. So my first book ever, and it wasn't her first book, but it's an early book for her, is a book called Heart in a Box from Dark Horse.
Okay.
It's very different than this, but I love that book, and a lot of that is on Meredith being a fantastic collaborator for it. She's just terrific. She was who I wanted to partner with right away on this. I thought that, so I had this idea and I had this Substack grant, and she was like my first call. I didn't force this idea on her. I gave her a couple options, but I was like, this one we're going to have to start really fast because of this Substack thing, if you're available. And this one's the furthest along. So like, take a look. But more than that, she and I are both really interested in monsters. What is a monster? Fantastical creatures, world building. She's much more into fantasy than I am even, but that's great for me because this has got a lot of fantasy in it. And so I can use her to help us, get it right and be excited by things. But we wanted to play with it. We want to subvert it a little bit. I also thought that her style, which is sort of this incredibly sharp and clean style, but that also is really sort of rounded and friendly,
Cartoony.
like in its shapes. Yeah. And it has a more cartoony style. I thought that it was going to look really interesting and different than a lot of what you see out there for fantasy and sci-fi. And I'm really happy with it. I do think it really stands out on the stands, and she's just a huge talent.
How do you feel about the sort of metaphoric comparisons that are coming through, sort of things like this is Saga meets Blade Runner? Because I said I was talking to my wife about your book. I said it's Saga meets Blade Runner. And my wife was like, "What's Saga?" I was like, "Yeah, okay, fine." She's great, my wife.
And then she goes, "What's Blade Runner?" And you go, "The divorce papers are on your desk."
No, she knows Blade Runner. She knows Blade Runner. But then we looked through the book, and she was like, "Well, it doesn't look like Blade Runner." I was like, "Yeah, but it's not like Blade Runner. It's the tier system of the society that's in place, and the Black Cloaks are the Blade Runners. They're like the Sandmen from Logan's Run.
Yes,
these are the sort of archetypes that you're playing with."
Yes.
Are you okay with those sort of comparisons?
Yes. Well, so I mean, I think creators sort of hate this because, I don't want to compare myself to Saga. I don't want to compare a book to Saga. But they ask you to do this. They ask you to do comparables. And when I'm looking at the field, that's the closest thing I can see from Image as far as character, what they're trying to do character and world building wise, like that it's got a fantasy element, but that it feels sci-fi. And then while Saga doesn't have a detective element, it does have a procedural element in the sense that you've got people on the run and people hunting for those people, which is not that dissimilar from, a murder case where you've got a procedural element. So I don't want to compare us to one of the best and most successful books of all time, but I do think it's the closest. I also think art style wise, while Fiona Staples' brilliant Saga work is very different from what Meredith does, I do think they're closer than a lot of other, like I saw someone saying that it reminded them of Monstrous in some ways, like world building wise and like the ambition or whatever and the ideas in it. And I can see that, but like we didn't pick that because the art styles are so vastly different, right? So, the Blade Runner of it all, you nailed it. I mean, we picked that like because it's got like a lot of neo-noir color paletting and stuff, and some of the environments feel that way, and there are sci-fi elements, but you nailed it, that it's mostly about helping people identify Blade Runner. I mean, that's why I didn't call it Black Cloaks instead. Literally, I'm like, well, Blade Runner isn't Blade Runners, it's Blade Runner, right? So thinking about that a lot, about just the mystique of the idea of you creating a new word that means a new thing. Like we all hear Blade Runner now, it didn't exist before, and now it means a very specific thing to us. So like if we could come even a fraction of that for us, that would be cool,
As a reviewer, I know that the creators hate it when someone says something like the art style here reminds me of blah 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 blah, but from the cheap seats,
no, we don't hate it.
Kind of sometimes we kind of need to say that so that people. People who don't.
No, I mean that even came from us. I mean when Image has us doing the solicit, like they're like, that can be helpful. That can be helpful to help people. And
understand
I do think
what the book is.
That's the best. I mean, none of us like it because nobody wants to think your thing is another thing, but it is the quickest, it's just the fastest, clearest way to help someone understand what a thing you're doing is about. Assuming they know those touch points.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's no point saying this book reminds me of some random film that only 2 people have ever seen in their whole life. Yeah,
but I was telling someone in another interview that we were being asked so many.
Interview?
I know. We were being asked so many questions about where the idea came from, and this was an idea I started like 10 years ago. So I went sort of digging through my notes to see if I could find what the original, because it wasn't Saga and Blade Runner originally. That wasn't what I was thinking, and so the original idea I had written in my notes, like a crime procedural, like a true detective in a Game of Thrones type of world. And then, which 10 years ago, right? That makes sense. We were all talking about those shows a lot.
Well, I've never seen Game of Thrones.
Wow. I think
I am one of those people.
We deviate really. I mean, I think that it doesn't look as much like that these days. I think I would pick other things like Saga and Blade Runner. I would pick Arcane, maybe. I don't know if you've seen that amazing Netflix cartoon based on the League of Legends video game.
No, I haven't.
Yeah, I think
I'll make let me write that down. Okay.
Oh, it's really good, Johnny. It's really good. Yeah, the animation is incredibly beautiful. I think it's a French studio. And it does remind me of Black Cloak. Both Meredith and I were like, I was like, does it remind us of it too much? And she's like, no, we're fine. I'm like, okay.
Every time I say it to my wife, let's watch some animation or some anime, she thinks I just want to look at schoolgirls in stockings.
Well, Arcane is not really anime, and while there are a lot of really incredibly hot women in it, I think it's pretty not that, I think. So maybe you'll be okay.
That's fine. I can rest assured. Moving over to Image for this book, is this the first of many books for you from Image?
Well, it's the first of 2 for sure. So this first arc for Black Cloak that wraps up this first murder mystery and then sort of potentially puts us on a new path. This is 6 issues, although they're all oversized, so it feels a little bit more. And then I've also got The Cull that I'm doing, and that's with Madia de Ulias, who I partnered with on my Jessica Jones book at Marvel. He's got a completely different style than Meredith, super realistic, highly all painted. I mean, it sort of looks like a movie or a TV show when you're looking at it. It's incredible. And I sort of love that they have this wildly different style. And that's a book about, I sort of call it a more adult Goonies with a sci-fi twist to it.
If somebody says you guys in it, I'll be amazed.
What's that?
If someone says you guys.
It's so that we're not on the schedule for that with Image yet because we're trying to get 3 issues fully wrapped and ready to go before we try to do that, so we don't freak out from the pressure. But I think the summer maybe is probably a good guess for when that'll start coming out from Image.
Cool, excellent. So what's it like now that you're kind of a multi-publisher writer? Is this kind of like you like the cowboy walking down the street now with 2 guns in your holster, not just the one? Yeah.
I think it's more about, this year for me should be a really good growing year as far as growing my brand into other ways and diversifying what I can do. But it's also a dangerous time, I think, because it's a time for me where if I take my foot off the gas at all, I think then it was a fine year, but it's not a year in which we killed it. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I'm trying to put the gas back down. This has been really hard. This has been a really big learning experience. I've been doing most of the things an editor would do on Black Cloak as far as with Image and files and submitting things and all of that stuff. So it's been a really big learning curve. It has been very time consuming, but I do feel good about knowing how to do all of that now. That feels great. And so it also makes me feel great about doing more at Image. But I do think that a sort of unsaid thing, well, it's probably not unsaid, I just was not ready for it, which is that you know, the image deal is by far the best deal in comics if you're a creator, because you hold on to all of your own rights.
Mm-hmm.
But it is a little unsaid, I think, that it's harder, you know, like you there aren't as many checks and balances to like hold your hand. Like image people do everything they can and everything they need to, but you're just responsible for a lot more, which is how it should be.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying there's something to be said for when you're looking at your schedule as a writer and how much you can do. If you're going to do a couple creator-owned books at Image, that's an incredible year and you're very lucky. But also, like, be prepared for the amount of work involved in that. It's different than turning in 12 issues to Marvel or DC Comics over a year, and everyone else is doing all that stuff, you know, to like get it out. Like, I think people underestimate how intense that can be.
I speak to a lot of indie writers on the show, and I always get the impression that the writers are a little bit of a kind of sub-editor to an extent. They're the ones kind of fielding the questions from the artist or from the other editors asking questions. So it's not just the fact you've got to write the story and then hand that off and then, you know, have the argument that the artist did this and you didn't do this or whatever. But then you also have the conversation with other things going on as well. So
yeah, and I think it was particularly tricky. It's particularly tricky at Image because Image gives you that freedom, right? You don't even have to hire an editor if you want. I think you're a fool if you don't. But but they're, because they're not putting any restrictions or any limitations on what you can do, I do think like feast or famine, fail or succeed is a lot more on you. And it's also up to you to do your due diligence about things. And when you're new to it, that can be hard. And I think the Image thing and the Substack thing, the Image thing, not so much, but the Substack thing, it's a little bit like when I did a Kickstarter, it feels great to have that control. But at the end of the day, I want to be a writer, not a writer and an editor and a manager and a publicist and a PR and a shipping manager and a customer complaint department. And
I do not want to be the guy that puts the staples in the book.
Exactly.
Do not give me that job.
Yeah, we're not there yet, but it does sometimes feel a little bit like that. And Image was not that. I don't want to say it was that, but it was more that than when you're working with Marvel or DC, which I hadn't really prepared myself for, even though I knew that was a thing. So I think it's just like being a writer in a business like this, any kind of gig economy freelance situation, like, you know, it's all about picking the things you feel really passionate about and that you're willing to work on and like put that effort in, because it's a lot of effort. And for comics, you can make a lot of money, but most of us don't make a lot of money. So you really got to love it, you know, you gotta want it.
Don't tell me how much I make on this podcast.
As someone who worked for free for many, many years for comic sites, I feel you.
All right. Okay. So, unlike YouTube, I'm going to tell you that there's a break coming up. Hey. All right. Here is one of our breaks for one of our other shows that you can find out on the UCPN. Check it out. There is Crisis in the Toyverse with nary a Captain Marvel or a Black Cloak yet on there. You're an Image. You must be. Hey Todd, I need a figure. All right, Chris, I'm fine. No, does that not work? No.
Yeah, I wish.
All right. Just be so cool, wouldn't it? Be so cool. All right, background's changed. We are here with the fantastic Kelly Thompson. Kelly, when I hear your name, there is one book I think of without a shadow of a doubt. It's Captain Marvel. All right. That is one of for me, and I've said this many, many, many times, the most consistent book that Marvel put out on a month-to-month basis is this book. Every issue has a fantastic level of writing. The art works. It's powerful. It's funny. You know, this book ticks all the boxes. So, first of all, thank you so much for putting so much time and effort into this character. Because I absolutely love Carol. I love Carol back in the 70s. So, you know, that's yeah,
well, thank you so much. It's been incredible. You know, this is by far the longest run I've ever gotten by like multiple factors. Like, I mean, I think prior to this, I only had done 16 issues, and like we're on 45 now, and 46. We're headed toward 50. So, you know, it's been incredible. We started in 2019, right, with the movie launch, and it's been a wild ride. I mean, we were never famous enough and critically acclaimed enough to sort of get the runway that Al got on Immortal Hulk. But it is funny that we were sort of doing it at similar times, like they were just a little ahead of us. And we really are the two sort of breakout runs from this last 5 years or so that have managed to go to like 50, a really long run. And honestly, I don't think anyone expected it with Carol. They've really struggled for whatever reason. Like, you know, she was really plagued by a lot of relaunches, despite great talent on the book and good stories. It just sort of wasn't quite working. I don't know what the magic was that we hit. I mean, I know we were vulnerable in that first year. We had to go from our first opening arc of 5 issues to a crossover, which I'm not a fan of, for 2 issues. And that also meant an alternate artist, which, no offense to alternate artists, but you know, it's not what people came on board for. So it's always a risk. And, but we were very lucky that we then went into issue 8, which introduced or sort of reintroduced a character called Star.
Yeah.
Man, it just, people were really excited about it, like unreasonably excited, in my opinion, but I'll take it. Well, I just didn't get I just couldn't tell what was happening. It was like, you know, because here's the real mystery and the real secret, right? I put in basically the same amount of effort in every issue. So it's a shock to me when I mean, sometimes I get it. Sometimes I look at an issue and I'm like, oh, that didn't come together the way we thought, or that art wasn't as great as we thought, or we were running late and I feel like you can see it on the edges of it or whatever. Like, so I'm not saying I look at every issue and I'm like, it's a perfect 10. It should always get a 10. Like, that's not that. But I care. I don't, there's not an issue of Carol's book that I look at and go like, oh, it's a filler issue, I don't really care, I'll just bang it out. Like, it really matters to me, much to my detriment a lot of the time, because I get too invested, I care too much, I'm too passionate, blah, blah, blah. But
don't say blah 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 about something that's so good at what you do.
It really can be a problem. I mean, I've butted heads with editors because, you know, me caring so much about a little thing is really fucking annoying, you know?
Well,
so
let me build on that, just that little segment. Sorry to interject there.
No.
Because I want to come back to Star, because I have a theory on Star. But you talk about butt heads with editors and stuff. Halfway through your run, that first year of Captain Marvel, they actually put out a second book, a miniseries book, The Life of Captain Marvel, in which they change her origin.
Like, they put out the trade, you mean?
Yeah. I've just recently I bought it, and I've kind of. Sorry, I'll say that again. I reviewed it back in the day when it first came out.
Right.
And I've recently just gone out and bought the single. I'm a single guy. I'm not a single guy. I like the
single issues.
Yeah, because you get a graphic novel or a trade. It's all well and good until you get to the middle, and then you have to do that. To break the time, which kills me. So I've recently just bought the 5 issues, including the Stanley commemorative cover. That's how nuts I am. So, but Captain Marvel's origin, Carol Danvers, Miss Marvel, back in the 70s, has been that origin for God knows how long, even used in the movie. And then, well, to some extent. And then halfway through your first year,
No,
they
no.
say, they're like,
No,
oh, but hold on a second.
no, it
Her
was
mum's
before.
Kree.
No, I knew. No, Life of Captain Marvel preceded me.
All right, okay.
It came right before me, so I knew there was a new origin.
And how
And
is that all right?
It seemed ill-advised to me to change it, given that, to my understanding, and as we all know now, it wasn't synced up with the movie, which I get. I don't think the comics should follow the movie. It just seemed odd to me that you would do a big new origin right at a time right as or before the movie was coming out. That why wouldn't you try to sync them more up? Because I think Marvel's take on how the comics should inform the movies is great, and the correct one, which is that they have to be pushing forward. They can't be following. They need to be mining new ground and creating great new work for the movies to decide to adapt in its own way. They can't follow the movies. That way is madness. That's like novelization of stories, right? So I think, but it did. I think the new origin, I don't know where it came from, to be honest. Like, I don't know if it was Margie's idea and everyone loved it, or if it was editorially directed, or maybe Marvel wanted to change it up just to keep it loose so that it wasn't so perfectly defined, is because they knew the movie was going to do something different. I don't really know where that story came from. It was just what I inherited. I didn't really care one way or another because I didn't want to get too much into her origin stuff, but it did end up creating fun stuff for me to play with, like
L'Oreal,
half sister. Yeah. And I'm like, well, if I get to make Carol Danvers half sister, she's going to be a giant blue buff chick, and that will be great. She'll be like Ferdinand the Bull. Like, she's built for war, but she'd really rather be out in a pasture smelling flowers. And I love her. So yeah, I mean, listen, it benefited me in that sense for sure. I wasn't really involved and don't really know it, but you inherit all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, it's a fair shout. I was just curious because, very much like you, when I read the first issue of the first series of Life of Captain Marvel, I thought, oh my god, they're going to change the origin to suit the movie.
Yeah.
So then when I went to the movie and I saw there was, give or take, the one that I'm familiar with, I was kind of like, I'm kind of confused. I think this leads into your other point you made earlier about how many times Marvel have tried to launch and keep Captain Marvel or Carol going. You know, I find that her and Spider-Woman, Jessica Drew Spider-Woman, are of the same era. They both came out in the 70s, and both have had trouble, rightly or wrongly, finding an audience, which I think is bloody odd, considering I loved the Spider-Woman run back in the 70s.
Yeah.
I loved, you heard me at the start, I loved Dennis Hopeless stuff. I loved Carla Pacheco stuff. And I know I've said the name wrong, sorry.
They're great characters. Then they deserve that kind of focus that they're getting now. It's good to see. But I just think, I mean, to be honest, I think the market is really tough for, I mean, even Thor struggles, like even Captain America and Black Panther struggle now. Like, it's just a tough market. There's a lot to choose from. There's more variety than there's ever been, and it's hard.
Well, I'm a Batman fan, as pretty much loads of people are.
We all are.
I do not buy every Batman book that hits the shelf.
Yeah,
I buy Batman.
It's impossible. You'd be poor. You'd be broke.
I buy The Knight by Chip Zdarsky because that's absolutely spot on.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
In my time, I buy Captain Marvel. I buy Spider-Woman when she's around. I love Black Cat. Jed McKay on Black Cat. It's kind of like such a synergy there.
Yeah.
That makes it. We talk. I interviewed Jed McKay ages ago, and he said you have to find the Star. Had to find a Black Cat issue with Star on the cover because it was a kind of, ooh, look what's going to happen kind of thing.
Right.
So Star, I mentioned it earlier.
Yeah.
When I first saw that issue with Star introduced and so on, all I thought of from the get-go was Power Girl.
Interesting.
And Power Girl's been vacant and she's been absent from the DC universe for God knows how long, thanks to a bloody costume of all things. But that's what I thought, and I was like, and then that got me thinking how much like Carol, Power Girl is, and vice versa.
Yeah.
Because again, they're both characters from the 70s. They're both supposed to be at the 70s promoting feminism, but then written by blokes, so they got it completely wrong.
Yeah, it's funny. People always try to say Carol is Marvel's Wonder Woman, which I don't see at all. She's much more the Superman to me.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't know if they don't like that because he's not a girl, but that's dumb. But so
that's why you get
Power Girl is pretty good too. Power Girl is pretty good too for the power set and everything like that. And you're right. And the attitude and like what they went through in the 70s, that's pretty good. I like that. Yeah. I always have been saying Superman or sometimes Green Lantern, which I don't really like to say because I'm just not that good with the Green Lantern Corps and all that stuff. I'm just not very military minded, but I admit that obviously the military sort of vibe of the Green Lantern stuff definitely has some Carol ties for sure.
Yeah, that goes back a while.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's also, I will say that if I didn't want her to be so tied to Green Lanterns as a comparison, I really messed up because I have made a lot of the stuff, especially in this back half of Carol's run, about like part of what really makes her special is sort of a real indomitable will, like her.
So I hate disagreeing with writers.
That's all right.
What makes Carol Carol is the fact she's got this massive, great big power set. She can go toe to toe with Thor, but at the end of the day, she still needs her friends. And I absolutely adore that about her.
I do think that's 100% part of Carol for sure.
Why else are the Avengers in nearly every other issue?
I'm not, because I like superheroes. I don't know. I mean, I just feel like a character's sort of only as good as their villains. They're only as good as their supporting cast. So I do tend to populate things that way for sure. That's a trope of mine. I'm sure if we excavate my stuff, I'm not saying Will makes Carol what she is. I'm just saying I think it's part of her, and some of that I get from the Kelly Thompson stuff that I think is so powerful in her DNA, and some of it goes all the way back to her origins, I think, and like Carol sort of never being willing to step down, even when she was someone without powers, even when she was someone just coming into them, like the way she was, But yeah,
I've got to ask you a quick question about writing styles. All right. I'm going to go one way, then I'm going to go the other. I'm going to zig and zag. Seems to be
serpentine.
That's me. Johnny the Machine, the Snake Hughes.
Machine rhymes with serpentine. Come on.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I'm going to change that. What was I going to say? Right. Okay. So a lot of Marvel books have a crazy amount of humor in it. Sometimes I feel from the cheap seats looking in that sometimes characters can be plug and play. You know what I mean? It's like, especially in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I could take Star-Lord out of Guardians and put Spider-Man in, and the jokes would still be as funny because it's still the same joke. Is this like a Marvel kind of editorial thing where Spider-Man gets to be funny, Black Cat gets to be funny, Carol gets to be funny, Jessica gets to be funny? That's Jessica Drew, not Jessica Jones, because she's not funny at all. She's a badass, but still. Is this Tony Stark gets to be funny? Is this kind of some sort of
it's not, for my part at least, it's not editorial, no. It's just how I write. But I would argue that Carol is not funny. I mean, I think Carol has like a dad joke kind of humor. So it's sort of like embarrassing funny a little bit. Well, me too. That's why I write it that way. I think it's sort of charming that she's not funny. Like, I even have people making jokes where they're like, listen, you're not known for your sense of humor. Like, especially not when her best friend is Jessica, who I do think is hilarious and genuinely funny and genuinely like sort of very weird in her observations and stuff.
Speaking of Jessica, I just want to give you, this is my zig to my zag.
Okay.
I would like to thank you so much for this little
Thank you.
this. I totally, when I looked at the previous issue, I totally blanked that Carol had a drink in her hand.
I'm glad.
Totally
I didn't want
blanked
people
it.
to get mad at me. I was like, no.
And then,
let's see over under how many people are going to yell at me before the next issue comes out.
And then I read this bit, and I was like, you know what? This is what kind of works for me. This kind of interaction. The fact that for all her powers, for all she can go toe to toe with whomever you want to choose. You know, these are the little victories that matter the most to her, and Jessica's there with her. I just absolutely well done for that piece of writing. I thought that was brilliant.
I mean, I think unfortunately for Carol, I think the subsex, I think it's still not a great sign for her that she was drinking in the illusion and that she didn't have the awareness to stop herself or whatever. Well, I think that's still a little dangerous, but yeah, I think it's a great moment for her and for Jessica, like her relief at something that it seems like it shouldn't be a big deal in the context of what they're going through, but in truth, she does this shit every day, and she also battles that drink every day. And so it's to her, except for the fact that other people are really in danger, they're very similar battles to her, right?
I liked how Wolverine absolutely seems to be crushing on her.
I love Laura so much. Literally one of my favorite bits is that there's that big panel where Quannon's like, if it makes anybody feel better, I can sense they're not supposed to kill us. And then she's like, except Laura. And then Laura's like, cool.
Yeah.
Like, to me, it's very gauche to laugh at my own jokes, but I feel like that is just badass Laura. Like, bring it on, dudes. I'll do whatever.
So we talked about diversity earlier on. I prefer Laura Wolverine to Wolverine.
I mean, I love Logan. I love him, and I think I originally wanted him for this story, not because I prefer him to Laura, but just because I wanted a Wolverine, and historically, Logan was the one in this situation with Carol last time she was here, many years ago with Claremont, when this all.
Can you X-Men 162?
Yes, yeah. So I wanted him in that regard, but it wasn't going to work out for, various publishing reasons. And I was like, you guys got to give me Laura then. Like, I still need a Wolverine. Like, I need it for plot reasons. I need it because I love her, please. And so they let me have her, which was, thank God.
Yeah.
Honestly, without a Wolverine, I don't know. I might have it's not that it's so key to the plot, but it just felt wrong without a Wolverine somehow.
And this is the magic of Captain Marvel. And this is why, if you're not into teen books, and this isn't supposed to be a teen book, but yet somehow it kind of always is. It's because it's these interactions. This is what you buy the book for.
People have really been enjoying this one, I think. And
the Brood are badass.
I think they can feel how much fun I'm having with it too, which is definitely true.
Okay, a couple more questions. Right. I've asked Carla Pacheco this question, and I've asked Dennis Hopeless this question. All right. So it only makes sense that I ask you this question.
The bar feels very high now, though.
When are Carol and Jessica going to be an item?
Ugh.
What earth?
I wish I knew. I mean,
Do you think this is something that is? All right. Okay. So this is.
I want to believe in it. I want to believe it could be possible.
So I'm not saying that them being the best of friends is a bad thing.
Oh, it's great.
And I'm not saying them being a couple is going to be the best thing either. But for me, these two don't go through all this stuff together in each other's books. Even it was Spider-Woman, it was Jessica Drew that saved her when Rogue took her powers back in Avengers Annual 10.
So here's the problem to my mind, right?
Yeah.
And this is why we always have to get in these. We have to get in these fights, and it's exhausting. Not you and me. Not you and me. I mean the general you. The world, right?
The world.
So people want to pair up people who have good relationships all the time, like Carol and Jess.
Harley and Ivy.
Well, that one seems like it's at least happened now in canon, right? I mean, I feel like everyone. No, maybe not. Okay. I guess I'm not reading the current book right now, so I mean, I'm not up to date on it, so I can't say for sure. But I see them everywhere together. It just seems like reality.
You're right. So it is kind of canon, but they don't. Other than the Pride special, they don't tend to like really.
So anyway, so here's my problem. We just don't have enough of this diversity.
Yep.
If we start having enough of that, because the pushback I always see is people are like, they're better as friends. Just let them be friends. Why does everything have to be a romance? And the answer is not everything has to be a romance. But when we're getting so little of it in canon, it makes fans want it everywhere. So because we're not getting it in canon in enough pairings, and enough being, I don't know, some reasonable percentage that is less than, or that's more than like 1% or whatever we're at now, like it makes people push it on every friendship they see that they like. And then that makes people push back because they're like, well, what's wrong with just platonic friendship? Which I tend to agree with. I like seeing really great friendships that don't have to be romances. That's something I also want to see. But we're never, all of us, going to stop having issues with this until we at least get more representation. Once there's more representation, then someone going, no, Carol and Jessica are just better as friends. It's a more reasonable argument if there's more representation.
Here's kind of my counter proposal to that then.
Yeah.
Just just shooting the breeze as we are. Shooting the breeze. I totally get that there is a push for diversity. DC, Tim Drake's now bisexual. John Kent's got a boyfriend. Harley and Ivy, Batwoman and Montoya, which was terribly well unpublicized at the time. I get that there seems to be this push towards stuff. Go back to what I said earlier about Miles Morales to sort of define my argument. The relationship between Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers, and Spider-Woman Jessica Drew has been boiling since Avengers Annual number 10. This isn't just let's have Betsy Braddock go off with Rachel Summers for no apparent reason other than to fill some sort of quota. These two characters have been naturally orbiting each other since the 70s. And that, I think, kind of trumps the argument. If someone says to me, well, they're better off as friends, I would say they've been friends since 1977. Do you not think they should try something else just a little? That's why there's more than one type of food on the menu, my friend. That would be my.
I'm definitely not anti Carol and Jessica. I've brought it up. I've talked about it a little bit with Marvel.
I thought it was going to happen.
I think it's only natural that it would be brought up, to be honest. I think the biggest problem, I know people want to perceive Marvel as the problem there, and I don't know, maybe they are, I don't know, but I think the bigger problem is just understanding that, especially because of the movie stuff, which is mostly really positive, but because of that, Carol and Jess are now billion-dollar properties. And they don't just let people come in and just tell whatever, like they really have to consider the seriousness of, well, if we do that here, then it becomes a pressure to do that in the movies. Or but my argument would actually be the opposite, which my argument is, if Marvel wants to be ahead of the movies are very quickly going to eclipse the comics on this issue, if nothing else. And so if they want to continue to be ahead, I do think they should be pushing it. Listen, I'll be number one on the picket line with you, like celebrating it if they ever go that way. I think it could be a fascinating story for someone to explore.
My final question before I let you go and enjoy the rest of your very sunny, no doubt, California. Oh, is it sunny where you are right now? Because didn't California have rains right now?
No, I'm in Portland.
Oh, so yeah, it's going to rain then, isn't it?
Yeah. It's raining. Yeah. It's always raining.
All right. So my big question. I've had one big question. Here's my second big question. Are you ready?
Yeah.
When are you going to start writing Avengers for real?
I don't think that's in the cards.
What?
Yep.
You've got more Avengers in your book than Avengers are in their book.
Yeah, I know. I would love to write Avengers, but it doesn't seem like it's happening. Yeah. I do have something very exciting coming.
Oh, would you like to share?
I can't. I would be
Would
killed.
you like to share? Would you like to share off air?
No, I can't. It's too early. It's too early.
I'll tell you what. Off air, I'll tell you how. I will tell you how trustworthy I can be. Don't worry.
What, by sharing someone else's secret? That's not going to work, Johnny.
Well, it's a secret that's about 5 years too late. But I'll tell you. I'll tell you the secret. Kelly, you have been fantastic. They say you should never, ever, ever, ever meet your heroes. I have to say that over the last 18 months or so, I have met my favorite writers of Marvel comics, you being the echelon, and none of you have disappointed. You have been super fantastic, super charming. Nice. So I really enjoyed our conversation.
That's nice to hear. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the support. It means a lot.
I look forward to the second issue of Black Cloak.
Thank you.
And obviously see where the Brood go.
Yes.
Damn you, Brood.
Next issue is guest drawn by Javier Pina, and it's beautiful, beautiful. I mean, Sergio's been killing it, but I love Javier, so it's nice to see what he could bring.
Excellent.
And for those who have been disappointed by Rogue's lack of appearance, 46 is your issue for getting her back in the mix. Get excited. Get excited.
Yeah, bring on the Rogue. Yeah. I noticed one of my colleagues commented about Rogue on the review on Comic Crusaders on Twitter. I think between us we put him in his place. Jeff Bracey, I'm talking to you. There you go. All right. Don't forget to check out the UCPN for all your favorite shows, including the No Price podcast, where Captain Marvel books make a regular appearance. And if you really like your old school Captain Marvel, check out the Old Timers Comic Book Show coming up soon, where issue 19 of Miss Marvel Volume 1 is going to make an appearance. There you go.
Wow.
There you go. That's how much of a fan I am. Kelly, thank you again. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And as for everyone else, I've been your host, Johnny the Machine Hughes. Sorry, Johnny the Machine Serpentine Hughes. Adios.
Visit undercovercapes.com for the latest and greatest podcasts via the Undercover Capes Podcast Network. Also visit our parent company website, comiccrusaders.shop, all about comic pop culture.